Indie Beacon Radio with host B Alan Bourgeois. Welcome to Indie Beacon Radio, where creative souls can find help in marketing their creations. You can send questions for each show on Twitter using the hashtag IndieBeacon. Now sit back and enjoy learning about our guest for this show.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Indie Beacon Show. My name is Alan, and I have with me Jode. And Jode, you have a lot to tell us about. So let's start with the basics. What got you into writing?
Well, for many years, I practiced law. And I always I started to look at my cases as a storyteller. It was important for me to be able to persuade a judge or a jury or my adversary that my client was correct. My client was in the right. So as a result, I found that I had to weave and tell a story in order for me to be a good advocate. And then one day I decided that I really wanted to create my own characters and start to write. And I was really inspired to write my debut thriller, The Midnight Call, because of a local crime that happened here in Poughkeepsie, where I live and where I grew up. And it was that story and my personal involvement with, unfortunately, a gruesome murder that was the seedling and the basis for my book, The Midnight Call.
Okay, so without giving away too much of the story,
okay.
Tell us a little bit about it. I mean, it's obviously the murder, so it's murder detective mystery, or would you say murder mystery?
Well, let me tell you a little bit about the real story, because that inspired the book. It's a story about a teacher that I had when I was in high school, and 10 years after I was no longer a student, I had just graduated from law school. I came home, opened up our local paper, and there was this picture on the front page. And the headline was, Teacher Murders Teenager. And then I looked at this story. I saw that I knew the teacher, I knew the family of the kid, I knew the judges, I knew the attorneys, I knew everybody involved. So I decided to take that idea of a teacher who murders a kid and incorporate it into my book. And in my story, there's a pregnant attorney who gets a call in the middle of the night. It's her mentor, her teacher, her whole high school teacher, who calls and says, I've just killed someone and I need your help. And that's how the story begins. That's the inciting incident. So the story takes off from there, and it's about her being caught between the prosecution and the defense, and how they both try to manipulate her, and how she has a personal stake in trying to prove that has nothing to do with this crime.
Which clearly is a lot to unravel and try to figure out
Yes.
who is and stuff like that.
Yes. Well, it's not a whodunit. It's a why done it. We know from the very first line who the killer is, but there are questions that are raised. Why did he do it? How is this done? What was his motivation? And what was my protagonist, Jessie Martin, who is a young attorney, what was her involvement in this whole story? And to complicate things, she's pregnant. So she's very pregnant. So she has a lot of things going on at one time.
So I'm curious, since it involves a teacher, and I know from past experience as a student, as well as lots of teachers I know, that there have been times where teachers just want to strangle their students.
Right.
So is that a part of the market you're going after for this, or was that just one of those little tidbits?
Well, in this particular murder, the student and the teacher did not have a relationship. It was totally and completely random. This kid was trespassing through his yard in the middle of the night, and the kid was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And but it's interesting that I have gotten feedback from teachers, and it's because they've said that at the time of the actual murder, which was in 1978, teachers were put on a pedestal. And if a teacher said something, their word was the law. You know what I mean? Today, it's a lot different. And I think we question who our children are, in the care of every day. Do you know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah.
So that was,
Yeah, go ahead, please.
so that was a really important issue too. How much trust we put in the people that are taking care of our kids every day. And when I look back, honestly, Alan, I was one of those kids in this teacher's class. And, why did I survive and my friends survive? Yet 10 years down the road, this teacher who we all loved and who was very popular, who went crazy. I mean, what made his life any different 10 years later than when we were there? And as an adult looking back, that's a pretty scary thing to think about.
And it actually is a great novel for somebody who wants to analyze that as well, as far as
Right.
the non-fictional aspect and stuff. And I'm
Right.
sure a lot of teachers will step up to the plate on that one and stuff.
That's right.
Um,
You're right.
So I'm curious, even though this was a particular case that was resolved and everything's done with and stuff, and I assume it is in your book, is there any type of sequel related that you're planning, whether it be the character, the main protagonist or anybody else?
Well, yeah. Once I started writing this book, I realized that I was creating a group of characters who could travel from in a series. And basically, that was because in the city of Poughkeepsie, where I live, there have been in the Hudson Valley, there have been some really bizarre crimes. And it's such a small community that everybody is affected by them. So my next book, I've finished the manuscript. I'm now polishing it. Hopefully, it'll maybe be published next year, hopefully be accepted for publication. But it contains the same characters, and I've built on new characters for another crime that's happened here.
So, and that actually brings up the other question. You've been in trial cases and stuff. I'm not sure what your background is per se, but being involved in the courthouses, I'm sure you've heard a lot of different criminal cases going on, or whether participated or by other lawyers telling you and stuff. So are there story ideas kind of brewing in the back of your mind from things you've learned and heard of?
Absolutely. I practice matrimonial law. So that was divorces and family court work. And I mean, I can tell you that I've heard some crazy things over the years. But the crimes that have happened, I mean, for example, we had a friend of mine was assigned to a case. There was a man who died, didn't have any relatives, but for years, there was a rumor that he murdered his wife. And, we didn't believe it. The woman again was a teacher. She was a teacher that disappeared. And this friend of mine was assigned to handle the estate. And they were getting ready to sell the house. They opened up the wall, and you'll never guess what they found. The woman's body inside.
Wow.
I mean, these are things that really happen. So these are really good fodder, and they're real good inspiration for taking my characters and then just inserting them in that particular situation.
Well, we are at a point where we do need to stop, let our sponsors do their thing, but we will come back and talk more about story ideas and things of that nature. We'll be right back.
The Fire in the Rock by Charles Henderson Norman was named to Kirkus Review's list of the best books of the year in 2016. It is the story of the Exodus as told by Zipporah, Moses' widow, long after the fact. But it is not a conventional Bible story book. It will challenge non-believers, but it will challenge believers as well, with a human perspective on a story that you have never heard.
Available on Amazon as a paperback, ebook, or Audible. Do you send book sales to a company that takes most of your money? Want to earn more money from your book sales? Do you want a bookstore that supports you? Introducing a new bookstore for indie authors and small press, B4R.store. Earn up to 80% of your book sales and learn how to market yourself. B4R.store.
Welcome to IndieLector.store, an online bookstore where the discriminating reader can find award-winning books. IndieLector.store is not a big corporation. so we can give up to 80% of the sales directly to the author. Help us support them by buying a great book at indielector.store.
Join us for the 6th Annual Authors Marketing Event in Granbury, Texas on July 23rd to the 25th, 2021, where authors share ideas and learn from the professionals over a 2-day weekend. Receive your book marketing certification from the only organization in the world that has been doing it for 5 years, Authors Marketing Guild, a membership-based organization that supports authors from around the world. Learn more at ame.authorsmarketingguild.com. Sponsored by indielector.store, a bookstore that pays authors their fair share.
Hello, I am the author and poet Denise Bryson. I am the author of The Things That Cross My Mind, Love's Reality, both in book and audio form. I am also noted as one of the best poets of 2011. I have 2 new projects coming up. One is the Blinky series, where Blinky tells us all about our coins and our bills for our children. I also have a book coming out called Say Ye. It's quotes from Denise Bryson, just inspirational and that will help you along the way.
Welcome back to Indie Beacon Radio. Don't forget to like us, follow us, or subscribe to one of our many channels. Now, here is your host for today's show.
And welcome back. This is your host, B Alan Bourgeois, and we are talking with Jode Millman, who has written a thriller. We're going to say pretty much a thriller, murder mystery type thing, even though we know who the murderer is, but more detailed aspect of the story and stuff. We were talking about
thriller.
Yeah. We were also talking about another book you have planned coming out. So during this time of COVID, when everybody's pretty much stuck at home and stuff, have you found that to be a good time to be writing?
Yes and no. We have my son and his wife and their baby live in New York City. And we're very fortunate to have them move up the 1st of April. So they've been living with us during that time. So, while most people's homes have been probably very quiet during COVID, ours has been like a whirlwind of activity. When you have a 9-month-old who's now a 14-month-old who's gone from crawling to kind of babbling and running. But I try to write, I try to write in the morning when he's taking his nap, and I definitely write in the afternoon. And it's been challenging. Emotionally and physically, I think it's been challenging because we're also isolated. We've all missed a lot of conferences this year where I go and I usually meet a lot of my friends and we get to talk to people. It's not the same as doing a virtual conference. We're all doing the best we can. So I just think that feeling of isolation, even though writers like it, it's not really the best thing in the world.
Yeah, and it's been interesting to hear other authors say pretty much the same thing. It's like at first I thought, okay, well, I'll have some time to write, but end up realizing that's not the case because family members come home unexpectedly. Right. Things have been upshovel and just a disaster in some ways.
And it's also the news. The news just is very grim.
Yes.
And it's really hard to concentrate and stir up your creative juices when you feel like there's a cloud over the whole world.
Yes, it has. It definitely has. But in reference to those creative juices and stuff, are you finding now that your characters that you've been developing are talking more to you?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. The Midnight Call, I wrote it in 2010. And it took me about 3 years. So let's say from 2010 to 2013. And then for a long time, I had trouble finding a publisher. I had an agent for a while. She was in a very serious automobile accident. So she withdrew from being an agent and her agency closed. So what I did was I put the Midnight Call on the back burner and I started to write my second book. So by the time my first book was picked up, I already had a second book. So I've just been in this polishing period, which has been good for me because I haven't had to be as creative, but I've been able to refine my editing, which to me is something that I really had to work on.
And I'm glad you are, because that is a challenge for a lot of authors.
It's a real challenge, yeah. So
during that time period that you were kind of lacking because of the agent being out of commission and stuff. Your characters weren't talking to you, going stir crazy, saying, right, tell me, tell my story.
Well, I was always writing. I was always writing. So the characters, it's, I would have to say yes and no. They've been more refining themselves. They've been more revealing themselves, as opposed to, what I try to do is I create a story Bible so that I've got a really good understanding of who my characters are, down to their birth dates and their horoscope signs. And so I know them pretty well, but as through this period, I just get to know them better. Do they like peanut butter and jelly, or do they like burgers? That's what they, exactly. That's really what it's come down to. You know what I mean?
I almost want to say you know them better than themselves, kind of like mother knows better anyways.
Well, it's interesting that you ask whether or not they're talking, because I remember writing a scene in The Midnight Call, and one of my characters was walking down the street, and in my mind and in my outline, I had him going to the left. As I'm writing, he goes to the right, which created a whole different scenario. And it was like, whoa, this is spooky. I was totally out of control and he was in control. I've heard that from a lot of other writers too. Their characters just kind of take on a life of their own. That's the fun of it.
Yes. I actually saw a quote earlier today on LinkedIn asking, am I a creative writer or just insane? And I said, you're both.
Right, combination of the two.
Exactly, because it really does come down to a part of that, aspect of stuff. So you're finishing up the second one.
Yes.
Have you started outlining the third one?
I have. I've started to make notes, because when I got to the end of the second book, I wasn't happy with the ending. And I thought, there's no cliffhanger here. There's nothing that's going to want to make my readers read on to the next book. So then all of a sudden it was like a lightning flash. It was an epiphany. So I wrote another ending chapter, which now spills over to the next book. So it's been really exciting, really exciting.
Good. Now you mentioned that you had created new characters that were going on into other stuff and
Yes.
other books. But what about new characters that are totally separate from these books? Have you thought of those, or have another story idea that's not related to this series?
I haven't really thought about that, because I've been just so involved with these characters. But every once in a while, I'll be doing something. I'll say, gee, that would make a great story, and I'll jot it down. I must have like a list of, hundreds of story ideas. Whether or not I ever get to them is another story. But yeah, I think every writer does that. And then you kind of have to cull through them.
Yeah, go through
and
them and
decide
figure out
what
what sparks at that moment to write and stuff. So
and where you want to invest your time.
yes.
And what story really can speak to you.
Yeah, or if a new character really is screaming in your mind, it'd be written.
Right. That's true. That's really true. Yeah.
One question I always ask my authors when I'm doing the interview is, do you have words of advice or something to share with other writers that want to become authors?
Well, the first thing is perseverance. I had this idea in my head since 1978, since that initial murder. And it was always kind of on the back burner. But then one day I just decided that, I had, as you and I talked before the interview, I wrote a series of Broadway books, Broadway guides. And I inherited that from my father, who did the original Seats New York, which is a guide to all the Broadway theaters. And I was involved with those for a long time, until 2008. So once that chapter was done in 2010, that's when I decided that, it was really time for me to sit down and write. So my advice is to persevere and do it. I think we're all afraid that people aren't going to like our writing, but do you know what I'm saying? I think writers are very insecure by nature, but you just have to go for it. If you don't go for it, it doesn't happen. And do you know what I'm saying? And
right.
That's one of the things that, I don't think you need an agent, because I didn't have an agent when I got published. There are publishers now, especially in the small indie world, as you know, who don't require you to have an agent in order for you to submit and be accepted and be published. So you don't have to be published by the big five in order to be published. And that's one thing that I don't think that people understand.
Yes. And that brought up another question, and I just now forgot what it was. The difference between the seats, which is the name of the books you were talking about earlier, which is a nonfiction concept.
Correct.
Versus your fiction.
Correct.
How did you find that switch of writing to be, was it a challenge for you? Was it easy?
Yeah, it really was a challenge because when you write, first of all, the Seats books are a guide. So I was basically an editor. I had 5 people that were working for me because it's very content rich. It had seating charts, so I had to have a graphic artist. I had to have researchers because we contacted every single theater and Broadway, off Broadway, all the concert halls, all the stadiums. And then I had to have artists and I had to have photographers. So I was literally managing a group of people to create this volume. So I did a lot of the editorial content. But so that was a real collaborative, it was like, making a movie basically. It was a real collaborative effort. Writing nonfiction is different, and it was also very research oriented. I was able to take those research skills and use them for the Midnight Call because I'd like to make sure that everything that's presented in my books is factually accurate. And there are a lot of things obviously I don't know about, so I had to contact other people to give me information. But it was a huge switch because I had to learn about character, I had to learn about pacing, I had to learn dialogue. I mean, you name it. I mean, I was starting at ground zero. I knew nothing about writing a book or a novel. And so it was really important to me. I became involved with a group called the International Thriller Writers. And every year they have a conference, or they had a conference in July in New York City. And you'd go and you would literally be taught thriller writing by the best in the field. It would be Lee Childs and Steve Berry and Heather Graham and, all of these greats. And you could sit down with them and they would also teach you how to write thrillers and what's required. So for me, that was essential, learning story structure, which you don't have to do when you're writing nonfiction.
This is a perfect spot where we need to stop, let our sponsors do their thing, and then we'll be back in a moment.
World War II, the Holocaust and a mysterious package arrives in New York from Germany 40 years after the war, involving 3 families across the oceans. Mystery, intrigue, and correcting the most heinous of wrongs. This is just part of the story Michael Newman tells in his book, Between These Walls. Available in Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or at indielector.store. Buy it today and enjoy this thriller of a novel. Thank you for watching or listening to Indie Beacon Radio. Our sponsor, indielector.store, is the only bookstore that pays authors their fair share for book sales. Help authors to succeed and enjoy a great book by supporting them at indielector.store. Enjoy a 10% discount with coupon code SHOPPER20 at indielector.store. Coupon valid until December 31st, 2020. That's indielector.store, coupon code SHOPPER20. Dear Texas is proud to present the Lone Star Festival on May 29, 2021 from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., where Texas authors, artists, and creatives come together for a Texas-sized event at the Seguin Coliseum, Seguin, Texas. Sponsored by Indie Lector, Authors Marketing Guild, and the City of Seguin. A perfect event for those who enjoy the creative arts. Register for your free tickets and prizes at lonestar.bookfestival.network. Authors Marketing Guild is a membership-owned organization designed to help authors succeed and learn how to better market and sell themselves and their books. Join us at authorsmarketingguild.com and receive so many benefits you'll wonder why you didn't join sooner. That's authorsmarketingguild.com.
Welcome back to Indie Beacon Radio. Don't forget to like us, follow us, or subscribe to one of our many channels. Now, here is your host for today's show.
All right. Welcome back. This is your host, B Alan Bourgeois, and I have with me Jode Millman, who has written a legal thriller, and she's got her second one getting ready to get done and wrapped up and published, and then she's working on a third one, and she has a whole bunch of story ideas in the back of her mind. So with that in mind, we want to encourage people, of course, to check you out and find out where they can get the books and stuff like that. So tell us where the books are available.
Okay, well, you can go to my website, which is www.jodesusanmillman.com. You can find it there. You can find the audiobook on Audible. You can find the book on Barnes & Noble and also Amazon, or you can support your independent local bookseller and get it from them as well. I hope, and also you can send me emails, which is really kind of great. If people have trouble getting the book, send me an email and I can point you in the right direction.
Great. So for those that do have your books and stuff and want to kind of follow your progress and stuff, do you have social media accounts, Facebook?
I sure do. You can follow me on Facebook, Jode Susan Millman, author. Instagram, Jode Millman, author. Twitter, World Seats. I'm not really on Twitter that much. Goodreads, I'm on Goodreads a lot, Jode Millman, author. So, all of the usual, if you can remember Jode and you can remember Millman, Millman, it's there and I'm there. But I also try to interact with people. It's to me, I wouldn't be able to write if people didn't like my writing. And I've been so gratified. I've won some awards and Reader's Choice Awards, and it's very gratifying. And I'm so happy that people can find me at jodesusanmillman.com.
All righty. We did not ask about the second book. What is the title for it?
The second book is tentatively titled Hooker Avenue.
And you're hoping to have it released by when?
I don't know. It's still being polished. I'm hoping that maybe I could get it submitted to somebody by the end of the year. I don't know. Maybe 2021. Let's hope. Because people are writing me all the time because I left them with a cliffhanger. In this book, which came out in June 2019, they want to know what's happening to my characters. So do I.
Well, hopefully that third one will wrap things up a little bit more for them.
I think so, yeah.
Cool. Well, I want to thank you very much for being with us, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you, Alan. I really appreciate it. It was nice meeting you, and this is a great opportunity that you afforded me. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Indie Beacon Radio, where creative souls can find help in marketing their creations. To learn more about Indie Beacon services, to be a guest on the show, or to advertise on our show, please visit our website.
Indie Beacon Radio with the host, B Alan Bourgeois. Indie Beacon Radio is produced by B Alan Bourgeois for Authors Marketing Guild LLC, copyright 2020. Voiceover by Randy James, Lydia Bello, and B Alan Bourgeois. To be a sponsor of the show or for more information, please email us at info@authorsmarketingguild.com. To be interviewed for the show, please complete the form at radio.authorsmarketingguild.com. Music Always Rejoice by Ramcord